Hello, students. We're back. Today, crimes against property, or property crimes. You have the notes, same notes. We're going to continue from the other day when we talked about crimes against persons. And here we go. That was petty larceny, because these aren't valued at very much. I'm also stealing them from myself, which is a little odd. Let's investigate. Crimes against property. This depiction here, we've got a couple. We've got what looks like what we call a thief, and then, of course, graffiti on the side of a building, and arson. So what is arson exactly? Arson, by definition, willful and malicious burning of another person's property. If you're doing this to collect insurance, well, that's insurance fraud. Yes, you committed arson, but really your intent was to defraud your insurance company or somebody's insurance company. And that's a slightly different crime, but the two can be related. Vandalism, what you might term malicious mischief, willful destruction of or causing damage to the property of another. Now, the seriousness of the crime really depends on the damage you cause. If you head out for a leisurely afternoon of mailbox baseball, well, if you've maybe only taken out one or two mailboxes, you're probably looking at a misdemeanor type offense. But if you look at the picture on the right with the spray-painted athletic field, now that's a lot more difficult to clean up. Might not even be able to clean that up, which means you'd have to re-turf the field at quite a bit of cost. And so if you're talking in the range of thousands, you're definitely talking about a more felonious activity. Larceny. Larceny is what you and I would call stealing. Something is out in the open. I see a bike in my neighbor's yard and I decide, wow, that is one whale of a bike. And so I take it, drive away down the street. I see a basketball in the neighbor's driveway, and I grab that and run home and hide it in my basement with my basketball collection. You're taking something that doesn't belong to you. Now, the type of larceny depends on the value of what you're taking. So grand larceny, at some states that starts as low as $500. In Michigan, anything you steal that might be worth more than $1,000 would fall into the realm of grand larceny. Petty larceny, anything less than that, very simple. And arguably, if you're looking at the courts, your petty larceny case would probably end up in a Michigan District Court, misdemeanor charge, and some of your more significant grand larcenies might very well end up in a circuit court, and your charges would be felonious. Now, what else do we got here in the realm of larceny? If you keep lost property when the owner can be found, you're guilty. I find a wallet on the ground. Now, I have an obligation to turn that wallet back in. It's got a driver's license in it. It's got a name and a phone number. It's my responsibility to get that back to the owner. Just like anything else I find that has an identity marker on it that does not belong to me, get it back to the owner. Property delivered to you by mistake. This happens periodically in my neighborhood. You end up with somebody else's package on your porch. The fact that it landed on your porch doesn't make it yours. Don't even think it. Get it to your neighbor. Shoplifting. Yes, that's a form of larceny, generally petty larceny, unless you're, I suppose, gifted. And concealment. And what I would call a concealment is you tried to commit shoplifting and just didn't quite get away with it.
what I call it. Hey, I could get in trouble. That's right. So, be cool.
In other words, you're found with a product before you're actually able to take it out of the store. That is concealment. It's a attempted shoplifting. Now let's move on. Embezzlement. What's embezzlement? Taking of property by someone to whom it was entrusted.
A DeWitt woman is heading to prison for embezzling nearly $1 million from someone she worked for. Marcy Davis was sentenced to 4 to 20 years behind bars Monday after pleading guilty to 3 felonies last month. Clinton County prosecutor Chuck Sherman says the victim hired Davis as a bookkeeper to help manage his investments. Sherman says Davis stole about $980,000 over a 6-year period starting in 2012.
This is often called a white-collar crime because it involves more thought process and intricacies of details than it does just running in with a gun, saying, give me all your money, and running out. White-collar crime, you often are in the position of a highly respected occupation. Maybe you're an accountant. Maybe you're somebody that manages the books for a small company, and you figure out a way to skim money. That's embezzlement. I thought I'd show this chart because it's kind of interesting. When we are in recessions, notice what happens with the embezzlement rates. 2008 was a major recession. People are desperate, sometimes out of work or less work, and they start thinking steal because you don't have your own money or you're struggling. And so those kind of crimes do go up when the economy goes down. Interesting. All right, robbery. What exactly is robbery? Robbery is the worst case scenario when it comes to property crimes.
Little hand says it's time to rock and roll. Everybody freeze! Hands up and your eyes down! Back away from the cars! Hands on your head! Everybody up on your desk on the floor! Move it! Now, get down! What's the matter with you?
And the reason robbery is considered extremely serious is because it's a direct confrontation with another person. You are literally taking the shoes off somebody's feet. You have a gun pointed in somebody's face while you ask for their wallet. This is not larceny, where you run, grab something, and run away. This is not burglary. This is a direct confrontation, and that's why robbery is considered a very serious felony. You're adding theft to the potential for danger or harm to yourself or, more importantly, others. Now, armed robbery, use a weapon. Armed robbery versus robbery, that's the only difference. Now, if a teller at a bank thinks that the finger that you have hidden underneath your shirt, pretending that it's a gun, if they think it's a gun, that's often going to be considered by the prosecutor as armed robbery because it was the thought process in the minds of those being robbed that you had a gun. And so you have the same fear and psychology involved there. It's damaging, it's scarring, it's scary. And so armed robbery may be a charge even when you don't necessarily have a weapon. You're pretending to have a weapon. What is extortion? Extortion. You and I, street terminology, would call this blackmail. You use threats to get somebody else's stuff. The threat to what? To harm. I'm going to break your legs unless you pay me $200 a month. That kind of a thing. Destroy. If you don't pay me $200 a month, I'm going to burn down your restaurant. Do you understand? And then finally, I know something about you, and I suggest I'm going to spew that sordid story out to the world unless you give me something, money or whatever. That also is considered extortion. Now, we often tie extortion to the mafia, but the reality is your average high school bully could be involved in extortion. Extortion goes far, far beyond the mafia. Burglary, unauthorized breaking and entering, intent to commit a felony.
Katie Thurrock's home in this quiet Sammamish neighborhood was burglarized a little over a week ago. The thieves going around the side of her home, gaining access to the phone and cable lines.
It ended up knocking out the cable, which knocked out the ring and the Nest cameras.
They made off with more than $50,000 worth of stuff from her home, from expensive wine to diamonds to designer handbags. Thurrock had an alarm system, Nest and ring cams, things that didn't do a whole lot of good once the Wi-Fi was down.
Burglary is different than larceny in the sense that you're breaking into something. Whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a home, whether it's a garage, you have to break in. There's nothing, it's not like you're taking something that's out in the open. Now, if you're a burglar and smart, you operate without a weapon, after a lot of research, making sure families aren't home, monitoring the situation so you know you'll be alone in the house. Those are professional burglars. The most common burglar, though, is probably the one that's in desperate need of a hit of something, crack, heroin, cocaine, meth. People need their drugs. They'll do anything to get it. And they run out of money, so they go off and they start committing burglaries. Well, if you commit a burglary at night, because these types of burglars, the ones that aren't experienced or professional, they're stupid. Nighttime burglaries far more serious because, again, there's danger for those involved. Occupied home. You break into an occupied home, especially if you make contact with the homeowner or family. You tie them up in chairs while you do your searching around the house for valuables. Again, very serious charge. And then finally, burglars with weapons. Far more serious charge than a burglar without a weapon. You literally could be talking the difference between maybe a year in jail to 15, 20 years in prison if you're talking just a baseline burglary, middle of the day, nobody's there, versus that person that burglarizes a home that's occupied, middle of the night, people are tied up. Far more serious. Forgery. Altering or writing of a document with intent to defraud. This is the actual art of creating something fake. And your intent is to make money on it, to maybe it's a fake ID, to purchase alcohol with it. Whatever it is, you have the intent of making money on something that you know simply is not legitimate. Let's say the forger is working for you. I'm not a painter, but I want a Mona Lisa to sell at the local art market for $25 billion. Well, my artist does the work for me. I take that work and then I go present it as if it's real. I am the utterer. You are the one offering a document as authentic, even though you know it's not authentic. You're uttering.
No, man, I got it. It's flawless. Shit.
Twice. Alright, that's good. It's hard to trace, I guess. Wait, you changed your name to McLovin? McLovin? What kind of a stupid name is that, Fogel? What, are you trying to be an Irish R&B singer?
Oh, they let you pick any name you want when you get down there.
And you landed on McLovin.
Yeah, I was between that and Muhammad.
So if I'm the one who has a fake ID going to the liquor store and I get caught, I'm the utterer. Now, if I produced that ID myself, I'm also the one that produced the document. I'm the forger as well, but that's often not the case. You have two different people, two different charges. The forger and the utterer. Bigfoot. Now, receiving stolen property, what's that all about? Receiving or buying anything that's been stolen is against the law. The product's valued at more than $1,000 in the state of Michigan, you've committed a felony. Less than that, it's a misdemeanor. How do you know it's stolen? Well, unfortunately, sometimes you don't. And if you seem like a harmless victim, the police, the prosecutor will often back off. The downside is you probably paid something for the stolen object. You're going to be out your cash because they are going to take the object as evidence. There is an expectation that you're not stupid. If you buy a 2018 Jeep Wrangler for $500 from some guy in a purple trench coat that you saw meandering along at an intersection, that's questionable. Wouldn't it raise a radar in your mind that maybe something's wrong here? And so when you find that too good to be true deal, there may be a reason that deal is too good to be true, so be careful. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. This is not auto theft in a sense. You're using a vehicle without authorization, essentially. We sometimes call this joyriding. Sometimes it's possibly a stranger's vehicle. Other times it belongs to maybe your family, and your father said, do not use my vehicle. And there's bad relationship between you and Dad. And then you get caught out there on the roads driving that car around you're not supposed to be. Well, arguably, that's unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Taking a neighbor's car because you know where they hide their keys. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Now, passenger may be guilty if they know that the vehicle is being used unauthorized. Auto theft. Now, difference. Auto theft, you know what you're doing. You take this car and you have the intent of keeping that car.
It seemed like a very well-organized operation.
6 people are now facing federal charges for stealing expensive cars over the last several years.
Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina were all states where high-end vehicles were taken.
Police say the biggest heist by this crime ring happened in Alpharetta back in 2015. 8 Bentleys were taken from the lot, and the thieves didn't even trip the alarm.
No forced entry was found. However, they did discover that the keys to the stolen vehicles were removed from one of the desk drawers where the spare keys are kept from inside the business.
Police say the group also stole Audis, Mercedes-Benz, Corvettes, and other pricey cars.
8 Bentleys at $200,000, and we're looking at over $1 million, $1.5 million. So I can't even take a wild guess at how much total when you include the other vehicles from the other dealerships that were taken.
Then, police say the scheme got even more complicated.
They were taking these vehicles and then finding VIN numbers through online searches, printing out VIN numbers on paper, and then applying them on top of the existing VIN numbers from the stolen vehicles.
That way, police say, the cars wouldn't come up as stolen.
These guys obviously had done their homework, did their research where to find these vehicles.
Then, police say the group would even go to the DMV and get documents to make the cars look legitimate before they sold them.
If you cross the state lines, that becomes federal. And we really haven't talked about federal versus state, but that's true with almost all crimes. Take larceny. If I steal a bag of soccer balls from my local high school, it's probably valued at $400. That's going to be a local state case. If I break into a mailbox and steal a whole bunch of mail and run away with it, that's federal because it's a U.S. post office box. If I vandalize a local neighbor's yard, state. If I vandalize the side of a federal office building, federal. Depending on details of the crime often determines whether it's going to be a state offense or a federal offense. And the same goes for auto theft. Once you cross state lines with a stolen vehicle, you're into federal territory. As long as you're staying in one state with your stolen vehicles, state crime. Carjacking is kind of like robbery on wheels. You force or intimidate the stealing of a vehicle directly with the driver. You run up at an intersection, you rip open the door, you throw the driver out, and you take off, not realizing that quadruplets are in the back seat. Oh man, that absolutely is no fun. Carjacking is considered a federal crime punishable by up to life in prison. Very serious. We treat this like we do armed robbery. Cybercrime, any crime committed with computer or technology, theft, stalking, spamming, worms and viruses, phishing, music piracy, child pornography, all of those things considered computer crimes, and almost all of those things will fall into felonious territory because generally the damage or the offense itself is serious. Multiple victims with computer crimes often. Identity theft, stealing someone's personal information in order to commit further fraud and theft. There you go, folks. Most common internet type crime. People are phishing for your information, stealing your information. Sometimes it's, if you want, simplistic identity theft, people going through your garbage trying to find names, addresses, social security numbers, and so on. Serious offense, common offense, a very hard one for law enforcement to deal with, especially with computers. Now, some basics that we maybe have not talked about yet. What is the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony? Well, a misdemeanor is a minor crime. It's the little things. Felony, much more serious, major crime. By definition, a misdemeanor will never get you more than a year in jail. Your sentence will never be higher than that. Felony, always more than a year in jail. And by the way, jail then becomes prison. Felons, because they serve longer than a year, generally end up in our state prison system. Jails are run by counties, localities, and those are considered, for the most part, for small offenses, smaller sentences. You're going to be around less time, so they keep you at a local jail. Finally, what's a capital offense? A capital offense would be any offense that could get you the death penalty in a state that carries the death penalty. These are the most serious of all crimes. Going to get you life without parole if you live in a state like Michigan that doesn't have the death penalty. What's on the list with capital offenses? At this point in history, because of the Supreme Court and recent rulings, you will not get the death penalty without committing murder, and generally first-degree murder. Armed robbery, considered a capital offense in a lot of states, but won't get you death anymore. Major drug offenses, same thing. Capital offense, but it's not going to get you death anymore because of the Supreme Court rulings that we've seen in the last 10 years. So there you have it, students. Property crimes. Now, we do have an assignment that goes with this. It'll be kind of a summary of all the crimes. We're going to give you some scenarios, and excuse me. And what you'll do is essentially tell me what crime does this scenario depict as compared to other crimes. So with that, good luck.